Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'm just kind of seeing everyone start to come in. Yes, yep, that number is just popping up. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us today for our event. I mean, been going great so far. Judy Katz in that last session. Wow, I mean, there was just so much to learn, and I'm really excited to go back and check out the recordings for that one. But we've got Bela Gaitan for this one, who I'm very excited, a first-time presenter at any TLDC event. Bela is a technical instructional designer at Pantheon with our friend Heidi Kirby, and also the community and social media manager over at the e-learning designers community academy. That's Tim Slade's thing. If you're not familiar with it, you should be, because Tim is absolutely incredible, and highly recommend his group to get resources from. He is absolutely great. So Bela, you are going to be doing Beyond Colors and Captions, how to provide more inclusive accessibility. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to go ahead and hide myself and let you take it away.
Okay, awesome. So, hey everyone, or I should say, hey gang. That's my classic introduction to everyone. As Louise said, thank you for that wonderful introduction, by the way. I am Bela Gaitan. My pronouns are she and her. And I will go ahead and get the presentation going and get my screen shared. Just one moment. Bear with me. It's my first time doing this. I almost have it. Okay, if everyone could let me know if you're able to see what I am presenting. It should look like an internet tabbed window. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so again, as Louise said, my presentation is on Beyond Colors and Captions, how to provide more inclusive accessibility. Um, as I said, my name is Bela Gaitan. I identify as she and her. I am the technical instructional designer at Pantheon with the glorious Heidi Kirby as my manager, the social media manager for Tim Slade's e-learning designers academy. I'm also self-employed as a WordPress web developer and instructional designer, and I consider myself a fierce advocate for marginalized folks. The visual description of me: I am a light-skinned Latina with short, dark, curly hair, wearing dark lipstick, and I have a black and white V-neck sleeveless top on at the moment. Um, I use my lived experiences and intersectional identities in my advocacy as well as my professional life to bring more awareness to accessibility. So I am Latina, I am queer, I am physically disabled, and I'm also neurodivergent. So I've got a lot of stuff going on there, and that's why I'm such a big proponent of listening to folks with lived experiences in the DEI and accessibility spaces. And more facts about me: I love coffee, plants, and laughing until I cry. So I want to make this presentation as interactive as possible. I think there's nothing more boring, especially for a neurodivergent person like myself, to just sit and listen to someone talk without being able to interface with everyone involved. So my first question is, who benefits from accessibility? Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that about the inclusive introduction. Sarah, everyone, everyone. Oh, thank you, Claudine. I really appreciate that. So it looks like everyone is just like jumping right to my spoiler moment. So we'll go ahead and go through this anyhow. And you're all absolutely right. So who benefits? People with mobility impairments benefit from accessibility. LGBTQIA plus folks benefit from accessibility, and that might be something that many of you have not encountered when you've been looking into accessible design. Those with visual impairments benefit. Persons who are deaf or hard of hearing will benefit from accessibility. Individuals with intellectual disabilities. And finally, as all you beautiful people said, everyone benefits from accessibility. So I am thrilled that so many of you immediately tossed that in there. So in talking about who benefits from accessible and inclusive design, I want to talk about disabilities and inclusion. First off, disability is not a bad word. Please say it. Please say disabled, say disability. So while we talked about accessibility exists to everyone, obviously our focus on this is going to be on accessible and inclusive design, right? So when I am talking about disabilities, I'm referring to visual impairments, hearing loss and speech impediments, physical, motor disabilities, cognitive disabilities. And then in the center of that is my additional category that I call inclusive accessibility. So what I'd like to do is just go through each one of these and provide some examples of who would fall into those categories and benefit from accessibility, as well as considerations for when we are designing for these populations. So the first one that I want to talk about is visual. So in talking about types of visual impairments, we have partial or total vision loss, low vision, color blindness, dilated eyes from an eye exam, which is a temporary disability. Painful eyes can be due to allergies, infections, light sensitivity. One of the things that I want to stress is we have to keep in mind temporary disabilities, situational disabilities. So in this case, I've got really bad allergies. My eyes are burning really bad. I'm really sensitive to light. If there are accessible accommodations in place for people that have visual impairments and deficits, I'm set. I will be able to access it just like anyone else. So, in thinking about accessibility, don't simply put folks that have a permanent disability or impairment in your planning. Make sure that you're including everyone. So, in terms of design considerations, ensure that your colors have enough contrast. There's a lot of web accessibility checkers out there. One of them that I use, and forgive me because I do not have a good memory with names sometimes. I think it's WebAIM, AIM, is the one that I use, including alt text for images. So alt text would just be a description of what the photo is to benefit people that use screen readers, allowing users the option to zoom in. This is very important for people like myself. I prefer larger text. You may have seen that in my design on my website and even in my slides here because I do have vision issues. I'm also colorblind, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But allowing the users to be able to zoom in so that they can adjust the content to where it's comfortable for their level of eyesight. Using text instead of images of text. That way, again, screen readers will be able to translate that. If it's an image, if you remember back in the days, and I'm going to show my age here, when people were using these generators online to make this really cool, like, your name with flames coming out, or, the bubblegum style, fonts. And we would save it as a JPEG and, you'd plaster it everywhere. So it's something like that. It's not going to be accessible to a screen reader. So, look for an interesting font if you're looking for something like just to display and, use it that way. That way you're accessible. Don't rely on color alone to convey information. As we move through these different topics, any of them that I have lived experience on, I'm going to talk about because I think lived experience is really important in DEI as well as accessibility. And I'll talk a little more about that later on. But for me, I'm red-green colorblind. So I also want to say that color blindness is a spectrum. Um, and there's actually a lot of doctors that don't even recognize that. For example, my dad is colorblind, I'm colorblind, and my son is colorblind. We're all on a completely different spectrum. To get us together and look at a color and try to figure out what it is actually quite comical. It's like the Three Stooges or something. But it's a lot of fun and we laugh a lot. But it's also just fascinating that even within our family and that genetic trait being passed down, we all have a different uh, level, I guess I should say, of how much red we can see, how much green we can see, how much trouble we have when they're mixed, in colors like purples and such. So making sure that, don't have, as an example, don't have a red button and say, click the red button to continue. I might be on that slide for 10 minutes. and I might just start, randomly hovering until I can find something like, oh, I think this might be a red button. Make sure that you have text on there as well. That's really helpful. Make sure, and again, this is for screen readers, make sure that you have clear and concise page titles, headings, link text, and labels. Link text is a real big pet peeve of mine. You never want to do click here and have your link, have your URL, in that text. Make sure that you're saying, for more information, I'll give an example. For more information, check out, and here comes the link, Bella talking at the AIDC conference, and link. So that way, when a screen reader is going through, they know exactly what it is that they are clicking on, and they don't have to play the guessing game. And then finally, visual descriptions in live events. You saw myself do that. That is something I was only made aware of within the past maybe year and a half. And I've been doing that ever since. And I really appreciate that, because it allows people that have visual impairments to have an idea of who they're listening to, who they're interacting with. But also, one of the other situations, that doesn't make sense, but I can't think of another word, that I would like to call out is, say you are a new mother, you're single, your baby's crying. You want to take part in this event, but you simply cannot be sitting here at the computer. So maybe you're sitting over on the couch, you're feeding the baby. By providing a visual description in live events like that, you're accommodating that single mom who cannot be at the computer, so that they feel equally involved in the event and that they have the same access as everyone else does. So I'm curious in terms of visual. Like I said, I want this to be interactive. I want to hear everything that you all think. If you want to provide some additional types of visual impairments you would like to be brought up, or additional design considerations, I also want to say that this is obviously not an all-inclusive list due to space and time. But I would love to hear anything that others would like to put up here. Yeah, Bridget, descriptive link text. That's a huge one with me. Can GIFs be accessible? That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think technically they're accessible, but as someone responded there, by providing the alt text and a description, you can make it, accessible so that they know what is going on in that animation. Yeah, Kayleen, it's funny. One of the things that I've brought up on LinkedIn a few times is, I would like to see data on how many of the people that are setting the accessibility standards and guidelines that have lived experience. And one example I would give, I saw an accessibility professional posting about, never use black as the background. It's too much of a contrast. And they showed a different shade of gray that they were using. And as I was looking at that, I thought, okay, I'm colorblind and that hurts my eyes. I prefer black. And I took it to LinkedIn and I wanted to check with others that had lived experience. And sure enough, every single person that responded said, no, I don't like that gray color that they're promoting. It doesn't feel accessible to me. It hurts my eyes. I can't see it. It would give me a headache. So that would be interesting to look at data on that. That might be a project I have to take up at some point, because I am a data nerd. Yeah, Kayleen, very interesting. I had some people that came back and said that as well. Majojo, first of all, thank you for coming, dear. And Majojo is the one that introduced me to visual descriptions in live events. If you use icons in a presentation in green and red, up and down arrows, is there a way to set alt text for one and carry it through to all that are identical? So I believe that would depend on what program you're using. In thinking about something like Canva, no, I don't think so. Possibly with PowerPoint, and I'm pretty sure with Storyline that you can do something like that. But that's a very interesting question. I'll have to look into that. And yes, Keeling, follow up with me on that. That would be great. I'll be sure to share that conversation with you. So let's move along and talk about hearing and speech. So when we're talking about types of hearing and speech impediments, we're referring to someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, someone that may stutter, people with speech sound disorders, someone with throat cancer, someone that currently has strep throat as a situational impediment, or maybe someone that has an ear infection. So the types of, oh, I messed up in the slide and I apologize. That is supposed to say design considerations, so we'll pretend that's there. So design considerations for people with hearing and speech impediments. Oh, I did the exact thing. Okay, so I accidentally copied that. So let me talk about, actually, let me turn to you. I want to see what you all think. And I will call out my Jojo as well because he is hard of hearing and he may want to provide some really great gems in here. But what are some design considerations to take into account for, thank you, Cindy. What are some of the considerations to take into account for hearing and speech impediments and impairments? I think the obvious one that we would think of first would be closed captions. Yeah, exactly, Teresa. Yeah, Carla, transcripts as well, because I think a lot of people don't a lot of people get confused with closed captions and a transcript, and they are definitely different. Yes, Heidi, live transcripts for Zoom meetings or sign language interpreters. Exactly. I'm glad you all are calling these out because I promise those are what I had in the presentation. And this is neurodivergence at its finest. So I forgot to update that slide, apparently. Um, yeah, native signers, descriptive alt text. Yes, definitely. And I apologize if I'm missing anything here. Majojo, y'all are fast typers. That's awesome. So yeah, just not relying on audio to convey a message. You know, you may want to include audio and the transcript and possibly a graphic or a video, you know, have some diversity, you know, in the content that you're providing. Um, for folks that have speech impediments, do not rely on them to use their voice as feedback. I will give a great example of a company that addresses this really well. Duolingo, the language learning app, they don't necessarily say that it is for folks that may have hearing or speech impairments, but when you're taking lessons, you do have the option where you can say, I cannot speak right now, or I cannot listen right now. And you can go ahead and proceed through the lessons just with what is on the screen. So I think that's really awesome and a great way for a company to step up and make an accessible product. Um, I have a speech disorder. I have difficulty in saying my R's and my L's, and I have had speech therapy as a child. Um, I do fairly well now with being able to articulate my sounds, but I will slip up sometimes. And when I am speaking in Spanish, I have a really strange lisp if an R is at the end of a word that sounds really unique. And I think it's really cool. So there is that. So, and I also, my dad is deaf in his right ear. So, growing up, we didn't really have closed captionings because he's not eligible for a hearing aid. He didn't really know what captions were back then. Um, he lost hearing due to having mumps as a child. So now, he loves having captions on so that he can, you know, doesn't have to turn the TV up so loud and he's able to feel like he's, you know, if he misses something, he can look down and see it. So that's always been, again, lived experience. Teresa, captions for Marvel movies. I love that. Okay, so let's move along. And I hope you all are enjoying this. I wanted this to be like a conversation because again, I I get really bored if I feel like someone's just talking down to me. So I wanted to make this like a community chat. Those that know me know I'm really big on community. So let us move along. So now we are talking about physical disabilities. What are we talking about when we talk about physical or mobility impairment? Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is an example, otherwise known as ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. Partial or full paralysis, I had an uncle that was paralyzed from the neck down, and he did have some use with his hands, and he had to, he was able to use his electric wheelchair, and he used a fork with the bits spread apart to be able to smoke his beloved cigarettes. So that is adaptation at its finest. Um, Arthritis, connective tissue disorders, broken hand, recent surgery that would prevent you from sitting at a computer, or just feeling fatigued in being upright. So in terms of lived experience here, I have a rare connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it essentially is faulty collagen in my body, in my connective tissues. So connective tissues are everywhere. If you imagine that everything is just a lot more loose and lax, connective tissue holds up your organs. It's in your brain. It surrounds your nerves. It surrounds your joints and everything in your body. So it's a systemic condition. And I have shown over here a picture of my hands. They're a little odd. I have the right on the left and the left on the right, but you can see several silver finger splints that I have on my thumbs and my fingers. These are orthotics that help me to not dislocate my fingers from doing very simple tasks, because with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you have extreme hypermobility in most cases. And I am hypermobile, or what's known as double jointed, in every joint of my body. So these rings help to prevent me from dislocating or partially dislocating my finger. I can partially dislocate it from scrolling too much, from pushing buttons, and my finger will just hyperextend too much. I have partially dislocated my finger from using my turning signal with my fingers. So now I have to do like this so that I can protect my fingers. So this is definitely something that I'm passionate about in terms of my lived experience. I recently did a LinkedIn post, which is getting a lot of attention, about advising people that when you put a lot of additional space in a post, when you put one line, enter, 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 one line for, dramatic and visual effect. For someone with a physical disability, specifically like in the hands and fingers and wrists, that post is making them exert additional energy. It could be painful. I know the more that I scroll, it hurts my fingers. And, let's face it, most of us work with computers every day in our life. We're already doing that for our main job. It's just even more taxing if we have to do it when we're on social media or in a classroom setting or whatnot. So that is one thing that I wanted to address. And going along with the excess scrolling is excess navigational clicks. So if you have a lot of pop-ups that come up in your content, or a lot of modals on your website that the user has to click shut, just think about that. That is extra energy that someone has to expend. Taruna, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Always happy to share my personal experiences and photos and such. Thank you, Kayleen. I appreciate that. And yeah, Heidi's hypermobile as well. So hypermobile as well. That was a tongue twister. And I am truly fortunate to work with someone that understands that, and that we share that impairment together. Just allows for increased understanding, and I love that. Yeah, Heidi's the best. Everybody toss hearts up for Heidi. She is the best. So some other design considerations for people with physical disabilities would be, don't solely rely on input from a mouse. And again, that goes on what I was just saying about, just the excessive energy that person is having to exert. And then also ensure that content is compatible with multiple device layouts. What we're talking about when we talk about multiple device layouts would be, I use a computer. I hate laptops. I prefer to use a computer. I will use a tablet to play games sometimes, and I will use my phone. There are some people that need to use a tablet because they have to use like a touch screen, or they have very limited, range of motion. There are some people that use, I don't know the technical term, but it's basically a standing keyboard, and you put like a stick in your mouth, and so that they can use their mouth to press, buttons on a keyboard. Imagine if you were relying on mouse clicks for someone like that, they couldn't access it. And so it's just try to put yourself in that position. If you don't have a disability, try to imagine a time when you just really messed up your hand, or you pulled your shoulder, like you dislocated your shoulder, or you've got tennis elbow, or carpal tunnel syndrome. Try to think about that and think about how painful that was for some of the everyday things that you had to do. And then remember that people like myself with disabilities, that is our everyday. So imagine when we have to, exert all that extra energy and deal with extra pain. It's definitely not accessible. So, try to keep that in mind. Let me look to chat for a moment. Let's see. I love everything going on here. Oh, it's amazing. Choosing an LMS that is reliably accessible on all levels. Yeah, Lisa, that is definitely very important. Okay, so being cognizant of time, let me go ahead and move forward. So now we have cognitive. And I will have to change positions periodically, so don't mind me. That is just part of my disability, that I cannot sit in one position for very long or I start hurting. So promise I'm not trying to put my big head in the spotlight here. So moving on to cognitive disabilities. Some of the types of cognitive disabilities are intellectual disabilities, neurodivergence, which would include ADHD, autism, and personality disorders, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. For those that are unfamiliar with dyscalculia, that is where you have trouble recognizing numbers and shapes. And I know we have someone here in the chat or in the session that has dyscalculia, so they may want to speak up, but there is no obligation to do so. And then also memory loss. That could be due to any type of damage that you have in your brain from a disease like MS, Behçet's disease, encephalitis, anything like that. Situational disabilities, migraines, and severe headaches. And then also something like an injury, like a concussion that you receive. So this slide is probably my favorite one because I have a picture of my amazing uncle Norby. Yes, narcolepsy, Lisa. Love that. Norby is my uncle. He had brain damage when he was 3 years old from a very, very high fever. And my grandparents did not send him to school. For those that don't know my background, my parents were migrant workers. So back then, during times when civil rights were much worse than they are even now, for someone that had an intellectual disability and to be a migrant worker and Mexican, to go to school wasn't really a safe situation. So he did not go to school. He cannot read or write. He is phenomenally bilingual. You can ask him anything in English or Spanish and have him translate, and he's just like a dictionary. He is one of my most favorite people in the world. So I'm definitely very passionate about being cognizant of cognitive. That sounds cool. Impairments and especially intellectual disabilities. Speaking to my own lived experience with this, as outside from the epic uncle that I have, I am neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I likely have autism. I am in the process of pursuing a diagnosis for that. And I have borderline personality disorder. And I only learned recently, maybe within the past year or so, that personality disorders also fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. If anybody would like to learn more about that, I'd be happy to share resources with you. And then also, I have a lot of cognitive deficits due to multiple brain lesions that I have. I originally carried an MS diagnosis, but that was redacted after a lot of testing and abnormalities and atypical symptoms. So at this point, we don't know what has caused them, but I have so many lesions that they cannot count. They estimate it's 60 to 80. And as one of my precious friends says, it's just a lot of glitter in my brain. And I like that. So I do have issues with not remembering things. I'm glad someone liked that. I saw the laughs going up. um, but yeah, I do not have the best memory sometimes. I have to ask for instructions to be repeated or reworded. Um, I'm thankful that I work in a really supportive and accommodating environment. I never feel bad. Um, I do want to give a shout out to my coworker, John. I believe he might be here today, but recently we had something from our company that came out that had shades of reds and greens in a graph. And I was like, well, I can't really see that. He so wonderfully took it upon himself to go change it and made it to colors that were not red and green. So these are the type of people and allies that you really want and need in your life. Look at John. It's me. John's the best also. Um, so yeah, so thinking about considerations for dealing with folks like, being able to provide accommodations and accessibility for like my uncle Norby, for someone like myself, or anybody that has any of the other issues here. Some of the things that you can do is provide image descriptions. Let me explain. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you already know what these are because I'm passionate about them. Alt text is what you put in the settings of a photo. This is for screen readers. An image description goes in the post. And there are several things that the image description can provide. Um, for folks that are neurodivergent, if you're looking at the picture of me and Norby, you'll notice that neither of us smile with our teeth. We just squeeze our faces as hard as we can and we don't, show our teeth. Someone that is neurodivergent may look at that and not understand that we're smiling. They may think that we're in pain. They may think that we're angry. They may think that we're sleepy. So, in giving an image description, if I was posting this online, this is how I would present it to people so that they know the emotion and the feeling that is represented in the picture, as well as the context so that they understand what's going on. I would say a photo of Bella with her uncle Norby sitting at a table for his birthday celebration. They are both smiling and having a good time. And, Bella is wrapping her arms around him and he's holding on to her as well. Something like that lets people know that, first of all, it's his birthday. So that's awesome. But also that, we're both happy, we're having fun, and, we're being affectionate with each other. So I'm a big fan of image descriptions. It really helps me because I'll be honest, sometimes I see posts and I see a picture and I'm like, what the heck? I have no idea. Why is a picture of a drawer full of spoons and forks, in a recruiting post? What the heck does that mean? And sometimes I'll ask, and other times I'm like, listen, they didn't make it so that everyone could understand it. I'm just going to, breeze right on by. And also, it gives another someone like myself being colorblind. I don't use a screen reader. Although I do have vision issues, I'm able to, access content without using a screen reader. When people do image descriptions and they put colors in there, that is really, really helpful for me. It allows me to experience the photo or the graphic or drawing or whatever, the same as everyone else. And that's the big thing I want everyone to take away from accessibility. It's so that everybody gets an equal experience. Everybody's at the party and they're able to have just as much fun as everyone else. That's how I like to look at. Yeah, Lisa, that's yes. I only learned about I don't know how to say that. Prosopagnosia, maybe. I only learned about that within the last few months, actually. But yeah. And oh, Taruna, you brought up a really good one. I think we have to normalize people not looking directly at the screen all the time. Being able to not smile being able to shift positions or switch between standing and sitting, etc. I love that you brought that up. I am a wiggle worm. Always have been, always have to be moving. I typically am drinking a lot because I fidget. And so that's just a habit. Like I take little sips, put it down, you know. Um, I have to change positions. I have neuropathy, so I feel like stuff crawling on me sometimes. So sometimes I'm in, you know, meetings and you can see me like scratching and stuff like that. And yeah, like I have a habit, you'll notice I have a habit of looking over there. It's not that I'm avoiding anything. I'm just one of those people that I'm like, you would think I'm seeing like, you know, in like ghosts flying around, like, hey, there's Tom. Hey, there's, you know, Jose, you know, I'm seeing like all my deceased partners that are going through the space. But it's just, I don't like to stay focused on one thing for too long. It's very hard for me. I need variety in the movements that I make, the way that I speak, and everything. And definitely on the smiling thing. I'm a smiling person, so I can't really speak to that. I'm always smiling. Um, but there's a lot of people that don't want to smile. They may not like their teeth. They could have TMJ and smiling is uncomfortable for them. And I think one of the things that so many people do is when they see situations like that, they instantly think they don't want to smile. They want to look, I'll just use smiling as an example. They don't want to smile. They want to look hard. They want to look like they're hardcore, you know. Um, they don't want to smile because like their teeth, you know, have stains on them. A lot of people don't think beyond that. Like maybe, as I said, they have TMJ and it's painful for them to smile. Maybe they, I don't know, maybe they're having a really rough time in their lives and they don't feel like they can smile. I think we really need to be accommodating for people um, in every single way. Kayleen, my autistic daughter doesn't show emotion a lot. Smiling feels forced to her most of the time. My son is that way as well. And even with him being almost 22 years old, I'm like, are you okay? Yeah. Nothing's wrong? No. And it's just that, you know, that stare, there's not like a big smile with it. So even like as mom, I still have to, you know, get used to that. But yeah, that's just how he is. He's the sweetest person, but he doesn't really show a lot of, you know, emotion. Am I smiling enough? Too much? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You all are the best. I wish I could just take all of you out to like a restaurant and we could just chat like all night. But again, time. So let me be respectful of that. So let's go on to the final thing that I want to talk about, and that is inclusive accessibility. So some of the folks that you'll see me mentioning in this part, you might not think are people that need accessibility or um, that they would need accommodations or such. But it's more about being inclusive and you know, being having representation in there. So a lot of the people that are often left out of accessibility, yeah, Joelle, different cultural norms around smiling too, definitely. So people that are left out of accessibility, LGBTQIA plus individuals. Let me go through these and then we'll touch on each one. Immigrants and people that where the language is being taught in that is not their, you know, native language. Um, those of us that have mental health disorders, people who are neurodivergent. I know we talked about neurodivergence, but unfortunately, it is left out so much in accessibility. It truly is. BIPOCs, for those that aren't familiar with that, that is Black, Indigenous, and people of color, Muslims, the elderly, and fat folks. And again, with me saying disability, there's nothing wrong with fat. It is the way that society and, you know, has made it to be a bad thing. It's not. I'm fat. So there we go. Um, so design considerations. Actually, let's go back and talk a little bit more about each of these groups that are left out. So for LGBTQIA plus, I'm going to refer to them as queer from here on out because that's less to say. So for queer folks like myself, um, this is the time of year that we feel seen. June. Why June? Because it's Pride Month. because there's a lot of performative allyship, that goes on at this time. So it's both. It's almost like I love it and I hate it. I love that we're seen, but I hate it that it's only for 1 month. And one of the things that I do anytime I come across content, I am really critiquing what I see in the commercial, and probably drives, my kids crazy, but I'll be watching it and be like, so, and I'm just using this company as an example. Toyota only thinks that white straight people should be driving their vehicles, because I look at the commercial and there's literally white cisgender people throughout. And how often do you see like commercials that have folks that are fat, and especially like super fat? And if you don't know what super fat is, I don't know the exact, I don't know if there's a size reference, but it's just, those of us that are very, very fat, very beautiful. And you don't see a lot of elderly folks in commercials. You don't see a lot of Muslims or sheikhs or people that are something where they are visibly not Christian. So someone like a Muslim with a hijab or a sheikh with the, turban, you don't see a lot of that. You don't see, I don't remember if I said elderly, but yeah, you don't see a lot of like, older folks being included in commercials or in content. And one of the things that we need to do is go beyond skin color when we think of inclusion. Go to a free stock website, look up, search for diverse photo. I challenge you to find a photo that includes people that are old, that includes people that are fat, that includes people that are, transgender, people that have like a physical disability that's visible, like they're in a wheelchair, they have a prosthetic limb. I challenge you to find a single picture that shows all of that. It's rough. It is rough because I would use those pictures when I would do like a weekly meet my new followers type thing on LinkedIn, and it was exhaustive trying to find that. Avoid triggering language. We have to be aware that a lot of us have traumas that we've experienced in our life, and to use words that are associated with trauma, violence, war, it can be very triggering for people. So try to be aware of that. Using gender neutral language. It still blows my mind that people use he and she when they're talking about just anyone in general. Like, use they, unless it's a specific person. If you're talking about, oh, this police person is, or policeman, policewoman, the Avon lady, things like that. Take out the gendered language and just use something that's neutral. Avoid slang and jargon. This is especially helpful for people who are immigrants and or non-native speakers. Things like, oh, that's a piece of cake. I don't see any cake. And you're going to make someone like me get upset because now I'll be hangry for cake. So try to avoid using, stuff like that, unless you say it and then, you explain it. That can also be a learning experience for someone. And then use a clear writing style. Try to know your audience and know what type of writing style that they would need. When in doubt, just be very clear. Try not to be too elaborate or fancy. Provide context for images and stories. So that can be through image description at the end of your post, or simply in the post explaining it. And the same for videos and anytime you're telling a story to convey a point. And explain acronyms, abbreviations, and terms that may not be known by all. That is a big pet peeve for me because I have to go look it up. And, we have so many different acronyms and abbreviations that are across all the different, professional fields and such. It's really difficult to know what's going on. I'm going to turn to the chat. Let's see. Oh, Dawn, it always feels exclusive unless it specifically is inclusive. And then it can feel like, oh, I'm included too. Yes, 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 metaphors. Exactly. Going along with the slang and jargon, Karen. That's a really good point. Um, Pooja used to teach ESL. Yeah, yeah. It definitely opens your mind. Oh, and Dawn, I love the they, them being included in the dictionary. That is awesome. Yes, Majojo, that is such a good point. I think it becomes accessibility when the presentation requires examples to help understand a concept, but all examples are following a cis hetero model. LGBTQIA people can struggle to put themselves in that context to apply the concept to themselves, for sure. We had a meeting last night through my work and with folks from WordPress and Drupal, and we were talking exactly about that. How so many, especially trans folks, um, do not ever see someone that they feel like, oh, that's someone like myself. I can relate to that person. Um, and it's the same way with television and such. I mean, look at some of the people that are on there, and you think about someone who is Muslim, or they are queer, or they are black, they are native, and imagine how that feels to just every time you go to a website, every time you watch TV, every time you're looking at advertisements or such, you never feel like you can see yourself. It's it's a horrible feeling. um, and I work really hard to be inclusive because I never want anybody to feel like they don't belong, like they are not seen. So final point here, because I am going over and I'm so sorry about that, but I'm just having so much fun. So the importance of lived experiences. It is so important to include the lived experience of people that require accessibility. And I want to tack on also in the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces. We are experts in our conditions. We are experts in the situations that we face. We know firsthand how they affect us. So, just building on my own experiences as someone who has multiple rare genetic disorders, they're all progressive, they don't have a cure. Most of my doctors don't know about them. I have to teach them. And the information that I get from my medical providers, if you can imagine how different that is from the information that I get from my peers that have the same condition. And this was why I was so happy to toss this photo in there. This is in 2019. It was at the Ehlers-Danlos Society's Global Learning Conference in Nashville. I am, if you can see the pointer on the screen, right back there. And you can zoom in and see it, but it's like tiny. But it was so epic to be surrounded by people that knew how you felt when the doctors were just going on theory. So carrying that over into the DEI and accessibility spaces, we are so valuable. We're so valuable. Every time I bring up some of my lived experience on LinkedIn, I get so many people that I reach and they're like, wow, I never knew that. And I'm thinking, yeah, because they're not teaching that. Or I get to connect with others that are like, yeah, I totally feel you. That happens to me too. I don't feel seen. Now I feel seen. Let's do something about this. So I know that I talk a lot. I know that I went over. I want to thank all of you. Huge heart to everyone. Um, Feel free to follow me. My website is just my name, bellagaitan.com. My tag is Bella Gaitan on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Medium. I have a YouTube channel that is a baby and I want to start adding stuff to. So if you'd like to follow me there, you can um, access the quick link from my website that I've created to redirect you. Um, yeah, I want to say thank you so much for all of the interactions in the chat. I really hope there's a way that I can go back and read them all because I I feel like you all created your own presentation there, and that deserves to be shared as well. So, again, big hearts. Thank you so much. Thank you, Luis and
Yeah,
TLDC, for having
yeah.
me.
We do have a few questions. Do you
Awesome.
have some
Yes.
time to
No,
like?
I'm
Yeah.
here. I'm here
Okay.
for it.
Cool. Excellent. All right, because these are good ones.
Yeah, please do. Do I need to stop sharing? Okay, there you go. Cool.
Yeah. So Stephanie asked this one: if you've used VR, if you have thoughts of its use in training, virtual reality.
Ooh, okay. Don't throw stuff at me, but I'm not a fan of VR just personally because I don't like it for myself. Um, Being neurodivergent, it's a little too stimulating for me. I've tried it before with the glasses or whatever in like a little game, and not a scary game. It was like a fun little game, and I felt really like disoriented. I felt like it was kind of like a, without sounding too woo woo, like an out of body experience, and it just was not a comfortable feeling for me. However, I do recognize the value in it. And especially for, think about someone learning to be a heart surgeon. They need some practice, and VR can really give them like a safe environment to be able to hone their skills and, get used to the different procedures and the anatomy. So, yeah, I've sampled VR. I'm hesitant to do stuff in VR because I don't know how capable I would be of creating good VR. Does that make sense? Just because of my own discomfort with it. And I feel like I couldn't really test it out. I feel like I would have a very, like a skewed opinion on if it was a good VR product or not. I hope that
Right.
makes sense.
I do think tomorrow we are having kind of a future of accessibility
Mm,
panel to end the event. So maybe we'll have
yeah,
some feedback for that there. But I know Alan Natachu, who's in the event today and is speaking at this event. I know that he specialized in that, so he might have some feedback as well. All right,
awesome.
thanks for that one. Let's move to the
Yeah.
next one here. Let's see. Jesse is asking. Are there specific image databases that emphasizes diversity or at least do a decent job of including a nice selection? They use depositphotos.com. While they can find diversity, their images can feel pretty generic.
Yeah. There is one that I have used, and I'm looking it up now to see if I can remember the name of the website. They don't have a lot, um, but it is photos of disabled people of color. Um, I'm seeing if I can find it.
Mhm.
Oh, I found it. They
Great.
don't have a lot, but what they have is amazing. And they also provide the image description that you can use for alt text and the image description. So I will paste that into chat.
Love it.
And yeah, that is actually something I have thought about starting my own project for this, um, because I've just been so frustrated in trying to find. I shouldn't have to type the word diverse to pull up pictures of diverse people. You know what I mean? If I just put someone sitting at a computer desk, I should easily see people of color. I should see older people, fat people, queer folks, disabled folks. Like I shouldn't have to add in the word diverse.
Okay. All right. Great. Let's see. Last question. I know we have a panel to wrap up the day coming up, so I think we're okay. Jesse is also asking: are there any CSS style sheets that is engineered for maximum accessibility? Jesse's getting a lot of recommendations and best practices. Has anybody developed a tool for us to develop CSS style sheet that only allow accessible features and themes? That's a really interesting one. I have never heard of that myself, but it does make sense that something like that
Yeah,
should exist.
it really should. And I'm wondering if, because I do code. I will say I work in HTML and CSS, but it's kind of in addition to WordPress. I like augment my sites using the HTML and CSS.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm just wondering if W3 schools would have it.
Mhm.
Um, that might be a place to start. I'm just glancing at the website right now to see. But I would think that I'll throw the link in case anybody would
Right.
like
And there
that.
were a couple responses to that comment in the Q&A, like one from Sebastian. There are multiple CSS features that help to increase accessibility on a web document. Thinking of being able to detect if a user has set the browser to dark mode, for example, so a developer can change text
Nice.
content color. No, that's absolutely right. And then Sasa posted AxeDev tool.
Yes, I've heard a lot of great stuff about AxeDev.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm gonna want to follow up with that a little bit, just because I do some coding too,
Yeah.
and I think that would be important to know for other developers out there. Speaking of which, and tomorrow we're gonna have more of a development track, I think tomorrow. So maybe that is something we can bring up tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's like a boilerplate for CSS that you can
Mhm.
implement that would, and for those that don't know, a boilerplate is like a basic template with all the different settings that you can,
Mhm.
incorporate into your document.
Mhm.
There might be something like that that would
Yeah.
include all the different, parameters for creating an accessible document. But yeah, I'll look into that. I'm interested now.
Yeah, because as a WordPress dev, I'm sure that could be helpful too, even though you're not doing a lot of
Yeah,
directly playing around with CSS in there.
yeah, definitely.
All right, well, everybody, thanks a lot. We've got just a few minutes before we start with the panel to end the day, which is just going to be a great conversation with the community, led by Kayleen. It's just an FAQ on accessibility, so please join us in a few minutes, and we'll see you there. Thanks
Thank you
again,
again,
Vera.
everyone.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye bye.